Hey guys, Songless, hybradge here, and today we're diving headfirst into the strongest AP carry jungler in the game, our favourite Bambi, LILLIA.
A little girl lying on her bed. Be brave, Dream. She needs you.
Since LILLIA's ability descriptions are rather basic, I'll just speedrun them and explain certain mechanics you can use in the mid-game section of the guide. LILLIA's passive makes her spells apply Dream Dust, which is burn damage over 3 seconds that heals you if applied onto champions or camps. LILLIA's Q makes her swing her staff around, dealing bonus true damage to enemies hit by the edge of her hitbox, much like Darius' Q. LILLIA's Q has a passive called Prompt, which gives her movement speed every time she hits a spell, stacking up to 4 times. This passive is probably the most important part of her kit, and you'll need to remember to always retain your stacks if you want to be a good LILLIA. LILLIA's W is a small leap that can't pass through walls, which is an AE hitbox on a landing that does 200% more damage to enemies directly under her. LILLIA's E is a roll which rolls on for infinity until colliding with enemies or terrain, having an AoE slow when connecting. Finally, LILLIA's ult sleeps all enemies to have her passive Dream Dust on them. Regarding runes, I've seen some people ask about Dark Harvest and Phase Rush, but since the change to designate LILLIA as a melee champ, Conqueror is the only rune to take, given the Conqueror stack retention from the burn damage of your passive and Liandry's. The healing from Conqueror also synergizes well with your passive heal, and it's essential if you want to perform the frontline carry functions LILLIA demands. Also, remember to take the Cut Down rune, which has recently been buffed so much that you can legit be permabanned if you do not take it. Finally, I take Inspiration second for Summoner Spell Haste to help fish for those big Q flash ults in the late game, and I take double Adaptive Force for that fast clear swag as well. Regarding items, in the current meta, the build is quite standard, which makes it easy, but a lot of people still make mistakes. In particular, I've seen a lot of people build Blackfire Torch, but honestly, Blackfire Torch is objectively a bad item for LILLIA, because early and mid game Liandry's does much more damage, and late game you want to itemize for resistances, magic penetration, and spell vamp, so there really isn't a place in LILLIA's build for Blackfire Torch. Simplify itemizing LILLIA. If you look at my cheat sheet on screen, you always start Blue Smite and you want Fated Ashes on your first back and Liandry's is your first item. As for boots, LILLIA is very adaptable, usually given that the meta is geared around CC supports like Leon and Rel. I go Mercs, but if enemy doesn't have hard CC, then I tend to go Boots of Bionium. The key exceptions to this rule are if enemy has double ADC, then you buy Steel Caps, or if enemy has 3 tanks, then you build Stalk Shoes. After Liandry's and Boots, Riftmaker is a must buy because its healing and bonus damage from extended fights works perfectly with your kit and allows you to dominate skirmishes. Having already got your core damage, you then need to itemize defensively. I almost always go for Zhonya's because I feel like there's a lot of hidden mechanics and skill expression in Zhonya's that can single-handedly win you fights as LILLIA. But if the enemy has 3 AP carries, then Banshees is fine as well. Alternatively, if you're the only frontline on your team, you can also itemize tank items as illustrated in the top right of the cheat sheet. Finally, your last 2 items are almost always Death Cap and Crypto Bloom. The order you build them in honestly depends on what enemy is itemizing for, in the sense that if they have a lot of magic resist, then you go Crypto Bloom first. If they don't, then you go Death Cap first. Generally, I don't like building Heal Cut on LILLIA, but if you have to, then you could build Oblivion Orb early, around after your first item, but don't buy the entire Morellos until your last item, because statistically, it's very golden efficient. For reference, this cheat sheet is available under the LILLIA guide section of my Discord, so please feel free to join there and ask any game related questions, and either I or another challenger player will be there to answer as soon as possible. Now to pathing. Before addressing the pathing itself, I want to debunk a common misconception that a lot of players have, where they believe that the best pathing for junglers is always the one that nets you a kill. That belief is objectively wrong, and as a scaling jungler, you need to understand that LILLIA's best pathing is always one that ensures she can get a full clear off safely. So the issue, which is honestly by far the most requested section of the guide by all of you Slongers, is then, how do you deal with invades, given that your kit relies on scaling? The answer to this question is twofold. So I'll first explain how to avoid invades through good pathing and pre-planning, and I'll briefly discuss how to play from behind if you still somehow get invaded. To avoid invades, you must either path to the side of the map where you have prior, or you must establish good vision early and path alternate to enemy jungle. First, if you've watched my counter jungling guide, you know counter jungling must be done with prior, otherwise you get punished and killed. So enemy junglers should never successfully invade you on the side where you have prior, unless you mess up, where for example you don't wait for your lanes to rotate. Having understood this, in order to path to the side with prior, you must deduce which lane you have prior in, and then path accordingly. For example here, it's widely known that Renekton is a very strong laner, so he's always going to have hard prior early, so in this matchup, I path top to avoid an invade. Obviously, I know some of you will not be that experienced in the game, where you can always understand which matchups your lanes have prior in, so if you are unsure, make sure to just ask your teammates about the lane matchups and then path accordingly. The second way you can path to avoid invades, which is perhaps the better way for players under Diamond, is by establishing good vision control level 1 to track enemy jungle pathing and ensure that you are pathing alternate to him so he can never invade you. To do this, you just sort of put a ward on enemy raptors 55 seconds into the game, or if you're playing against a very invade heavy jungler like Volibear and want to be extra safe, you could also ask your mid laner to put a ward on enemy blue buff as well. This way you pretty much ensure that you can see enemy jungle's pathing and you're able to adapt accordingly. This method also does not require as much game knowledge as the first method and is probably more helpful for the majority of you. Now back to your actual pathing. Since you're full clearing, it's rather simple. Depending on what lane you're pathing towards, you can either go Blue Gromp Wolves into Raptors Red Krugs, or Raptors Krugs Red into Wolves Gromp Blue. Both of these pathings will let you finish clear at around 320 with one smite, and your basic camps will be well synced. Just a tip on optimizing your clear on LILLIA, make sure you put effort into learning how to kite camps and point them in a good position for you to land your sweet spot on all of them, like I'm doing on screen now. Now into the mid game. In the part of the game where skirmishing is prominent, I think it's important to first understand the fundamental mechanics of LILLIA. Fitting into the category of an AP bruiser carry, the first and most important fundamental is that you need to make sure that while ganking and skirmishing, you keep as many passive stacks as possible, because the bonus movement speed will make it easier to hit your abilities and dodge from enemy abilities as well. With regards to ganking, since you don't have those massive dashes some other champions have, the movement speed is also paramount in allowing you to get involved and get onto enemy laners. To ensure you have stacks when entering a fight, make sure to use your Q and W, which have relatively low CDs on mins and monsters, to retain your stacks going into the ensuing fight. Since the cooldown of your abilities are still high in the early and mid game, the second important fundamental is that you need to weave in auto attacks in between spells to be able to actually win skirmishes at that stage of the game. The third mechanic, which I feel like is something I don't even see LILLIA players do in Challenger, is that when trying to land spells on opponents, instead of running with enemies, they end up chasing them. And since you're always running from behind, it makes landing abilities infinitely harder. So make sure that when you're skirmishing, run alongside the trajectory of your opponents, so it's easier to hit abilities on their movement. The final mechanic is more of a basic one, but remember, if there is ever an enemy CC'd, whether it be a stun by your teammates or the sleep from your own ult, please make sure you're breaking the CC with your E and Q combo together, as not only does it do a lot of damage, it slows the enemy enough just for you to hit your W on them after they awake. This combo is easy to execute, and all you have to do is press your E and then instantly press your Q after. Just a side note, if you don't have your E up, then always use your W to break the sleep, because not only is your W usually hard to hit when enemies are moving, the damage application from sleep allows you to pretty much half health the enemy off one spell. Since your W does around 500 damage to jungle epic monsters at 3 items, it is also extremely helpful for securing smites if you ever need to 50-50 as LILLIA. Since LILLIA is a carry, I would say your general aim is to generate as big of a jungle lead as you can. And remember that if enemy jungle is ganking, do not panic just because your laners are dying, but rather try to ensure that you're staying on tempo and adding to your camp lead. Obviously, given that you spent the entire early game playing pretty much solely for yourself, in downtime, still try to get your own ganks in for your teammates, and make sure that helps shove waves if it's ever needed of you. However, when your camps are still up, unless there's a very free opportunity, try not to sack any tempo going for maybe Gangstar Flip. In terms of what objective you should play for during the mid game, I would advise you to always try to play for grubs if possible, because not only are they extremely broken right now, as LILLIA you're also one of the fastest grub takers in the game, and taking grubs gives you a lot of gold that accelerates your scaling, which means you're gaining an insane advantage without having to invest much time. Obviously Drakes are still great, but since you scale so hard, not getting them is not as big of a deal breaker as it would be on other champions, because you should be able to get the 3rd and 4th Drake once your kit comes online. Finally, onto late game. I will say the role you play in fights somewhat different in late game compared to early and mid game, as while you're still an AP bruiser carry, you can get punished very hard if you misstep, so do not worry about doing things like weaving in auto attacks in between combos, because at this stage of the game, your cooldowns are low enough for you to spam abilities if you need to. To give a comprehensive overview on how to play late game as LILLIA is impossible, given the many variances in individual games. However, what I can do is give you some general tips which you can use as guidance in your respective games. First and foremost, instead of looking for highlight reel plays, be patient and play intelligent. Every LILLIA I see below Grandmaster always looks to go for big Q flash ults in the late game, and while this might look flashy and cool, you need to understand in most situations this is actually a bad play, as you're putting yourself, the carry, at risk when doing this. Unless you're 100% certain it's going to work, you should instead be looking to find good, creative E's over walls, which hit like 2 people in the back line, so you can get a risk-free ult from long range that can win you the game. Remember that one-touch plays are not what wins you games in the long run, but rather intelligence and control is. Second, I think as LILLIA in fights, unless there's a very good flank position, don't worry too much about hitting enemy backline, as your build and passive does very well into tanks, so front to back fights are actually what you should be happy with and what you should strive for. Third, as iterated in mid game, remember to stack up your prance, as this is even more important in late game, because since you have no defensive abilities or self-pill, all your defensiveness comes from your ability to dodge enemy spells and get into fights quickly with your prance stacks. Last but not least, remember, even though it's late game, still make sure that you're staying at a good pace when it comes to clearing your camps and staying ahead, and don't just waste a bunch of time hovering when there's no real objective or good fight angle to play for. That's it for my guide today. Just want to say a massive thank you for watching, and if you appreciate this video, then please like, comment, and most importantly subscribe, as it helps so much for the algorithm and allows me to make more content like this. Also, if you want to join one of the most helpful communities in League, where you can ask me questions at any time, Join my Discord and start watching me at twitch.tv/hybridge whenever you're free. It would mean honestly more than you could ever imagine. Stay blessed in the rift, and peace. We're out of here.